Okay, so we'll all introduce ourselves. I'll start with myself. I'm moderating the session today. I'm coming here all the way from Calgary. Very happy to, because I am an Oilers fan. I do have an Oilers jersey. I'm from La Ville de Beaumont, just south of Edmonton. I'm sure you know about it. So it's good to be back here. And I now work in Calgary as a venture capitalist with a new emerging and small fund, $20 million, called Thin Air Labs. And although we're sector agnostic, we're quite disciplined in the areas where we have subject matter expertise, and half our portfolio is in health. Previously, before Thin Air Labs, I started a charity called the Branch Out Neurological Foundation, which focuses on innovation in health, in neuroscience, and that's from a charitable lens. So Arden, on to you, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Okay, well, is this, okay, here, I just got to put it up to my mouth. That sounded different in my head. So my name is, I'm Arden Shea, so I'm with Yaletown Partners. We're a venture capital firm based out of Vancouver. I'm here in Edmonton, and I manage a team that invests, we have a fund that invests in Alberta's early stage technology companies. And like Thin Air Labs and like Crystal's fund there, we are sector agnostic, but we've made about a half a dozen investments in the health and life sciences sector. And we're realizing that there's a real opportunity there, and we're continuing to focus more on what's happening in this realm. So we're really excited at the opportunities ahead.
Great, thank you. And yourself, Amanda?
Hey, okay, I think that's on. Hi, I'm Amanda Vella. I'm with ATB Financial, and I lead their business consulting practice, and really working with all sorts of businesses that are in high growth phase and really helping have the processes necessary to grow and scale. And with that, we attracted some work in the innovation sector, and again, sector agnostic, but really working with companies to put those core business practices in place.
And my name is Lindsay Vanstone. I'm the Edmonton lead with Startup TNT. I run our investment summits here, and have been an investor with Startup TNT since almost the beginning. Prior to that, I worked as a contract COO for a startup based in Montreal, and I actually have an undergrad degree in life sciences, which I'm not sure many people knew about.
Fun fact, thank you.
Yeah, and just a bit about Startup TNT. We do angel investing into local startups. And we also have a VC fund that we've started, TNT Capital. And we run investment summits locally as well as sector-based summits. So that would be a life sciences related summit that we do in January to March.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start with a question for all of you, and then I'm going to have some individual questions for each of you. The first one is more overarching on, it's exciting right now. Health is basically an emerging trend for Alberta. What are the trends that you see in your world and the opportunities that you're excited about? Go for it, Arden.
All right. Okay, so we're kind of in the beginning stages of a really exciting period, I think, for life and health sciences here in Alberta in particular. Now, these are not my words. I was actually talking to Jason Ding, who we heard from earlier, who's been in this space a lot longer than I have. But as a venture capital investor, we're always looking for opportunities. And when you look at the history of the life sciences sector, and here in Edmonton, right, there's about, things were going quite well in the early 2000s. There's a lot of biotech companies, a lot of stuff going on in that sector. But a combination of things, including the great financial crisis, pretty much put that industry back on its feet, right? And it was dormant for about 10 years. We didn't have a lot of activity, not a lot of investment. But then coming out of 2018-19, things started to change. I mean, then we had the pandemic, which obviously kind of put a larger focus on life sciences and health. And when we say life sciences, it's a very broad umbrella. We recognize that, but let's just for now use that for health tech and medical technologies. And I think what we're seeing is, I personally, having been in the tech space for the last 8 to 10 years, I've never seen more of an effort, a focused effort by private, public, and semi-public organizations to get the research going on in the labs out into the market and to support the life sciences community. And so there's all kinds of things going on between the two universities. You got, the BioHub X in Calgary. We have API here. We're seeing a lot of interest, and I think the real goal is going to be unlocking the great research that's happening out of our universities and taking those to market, because, that's where we're going to have a big win. So we're really excited about that. And at Yaletown Accelerate Fund, we are focusing more on that. I mean, you can also include the digital health movement that's going on. That is more software, but again, this focus on health and basically saving people's lives. I think that's a pretty worthy industry to be investing in.
Yeah, and I think I have maybe a bit of a different lens coming from the banking sector and seeing the trends with everything in innovation is too big to be ignored now, and we're seeing those other funds come in, like banking come in and do more investing. We're seeing IP financing from some of the banks. We're seeing traditional investors come in and invest. I think that desire to solve problems and be very purpose-driven, which health really attracts some of that trend for really purpose-driven work and work for the greater good in the community, which I think all of that is playing really favorable right now for the space in Alberta.
Yeah, and to add to all of that, when you look at life sciences companies, there is a huge market. The Canadian market is obviously much smaller than the American market, than the EU market, and that is something that investors look towards, is how big is this market going to be? So, life sciences, health companies fit right in there. And the other thing that we've noticed through our investing through TNT is a number of our winners, even in the non-sector specific summits, so the non-life sciences summits, are still life sciences companies, because there are great companies coming out of Alberta, especially Edmonton and Calgary, and investors are really interested in that.
So it sounds like we are definitely ripe for investment, especially considering our rich history in academia. 20 plus years, billions of dollars has been poured into R&D that is now commercializable. So it's so great to have everyone here thinking about how to commercialize it, help these companies scale. Speaking of that, I want to ask Arden, who's the investment manager at Yaletown Partners, for VCs specifically, what is unique that attracts VCs to Alberta specifically?
Actually, I was just asked this question this morning in general about what is our Alberta advantage. And it really is the fact that you are only 2 conversations away from anybody you need to meet. This is a community here in Edmonton and Calgary, even across the province, where if you need to talk to somebody in public sector, private sector, an individual investor, someone knows someone. We're a very tight-knit community, and you can't say that about Toronto. You can't say that about Vancouver. I've been to both markets. Those are much bigger, more siloed. And when you're looking at a specialized area like life sciences, you really need to have a strong network, because this is deep science and technology. This isn't just software and sales. It's about understanding, is the science going to work? Is the data good? What are the regulatory hurdles? And if you don't have a network that can enable you to evaluate all that risk, this is why generally VCs have stayed away from the space here. But because here we have that network, I mean, I may have a science degree from the early 90s, and now I'm dating myself, but I'm by no means what I would classify as a scientist. And yet, in the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years, I've grown a network strong enough to give me confidence that we can find the deals and vet them and do the due diligence to make intelligent investments in them. And so there's very few markets where you can ramp up that quickly, and where you have such a willing group of people in the community that want to share and help and support. Because what we all want to do is see a lot of the science get to the market and create a big industry. Because let's face it, if you want to have a big industry, you have to have companies that can earn big revenue and get big exits. And for us here in Alberta, biotech, life sciences, that's where you'll find those kinds of numbers.
Thank you for that. And can I have a show of hands of how many entrepreneurs are in the audience? Okay, we have quite a few. This next question is for you. Still with you, Arden. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs?
Okay, well, depends on what stage you are, but I think generally what we found that is the most successful companies in this sector, especially for founders who are very scientific, or your engineers or technical people, is you have to learn how to share. And what I mean by that is you have to build a team. You have to recognize that if you want to bring your idea, your solution out into the world, you're going to have to go beyond the lab, and you're going to have to maybe even realize you may not be the one to do it. And that the best teams out there are the ones that have a great combination of technical prowess and business ability. We've just seen an example of that. I mean, there's 2 life sciences companies here in Edmonton I can think of that have taken where the founder took it as far as they could, and they found a CEO from another market, whether it was the US or Toronto. It's always about who's been there and done that, and how do you bring them onto your team. It's this, and I think it's the founders, and this isn't unique to life sciences, but founders who aren't willing to let go of that and think that they're going to be the ones that take this thing all the way to the finish line. Maybe for a software company that's possible, but generally, especially for deep technology, deep science, it's a very, let's just say the personality and skill sets are very different. So remember to be good at what you're good at, and don't forget to share.
I like that. So embrace unlike minds, create that relay team mindset. Okay, Amanda, I have questions for you. So Amanda is the managing director at ATB, and I'm curious, where do you see ATB's role in supporting startups?
Yeah, I think from our entrepreneur centers, we've always been really focused on startups and in supporting those small businesses. I think what's neat is we're really seeing a transformation into those bigger innovation plays and having a focus on innovation. And even my role in this was really from our lenders saying, help us help the businesses that approach us, because sometimes maybe when you've come up from that startup world, when you start to approach lenders or bigger investors, they're looking for more sophistication in their finance models and how they're pitching, how they're talking, that they get really nervous sometimes if it doesn't sound clear, crisp in a way they understand, and then they get execution risk. So they came to my team, like, can you help get these owners more ready, more prepared, more concrete plans as to how they're going to spend money, and then we may be looking at more opportunities to invest. So we're seeing us take little bits and pieces in some of those investment companies that, maybe 5 years ago we wouldn't have done. It just wouldn't have been in our risk appetite. So we're doing it in a very probably slow way for the market. I know we get approached from way more businesses than we manage to invest in, but I see the opportunity there. This innovation and these businesses are becoming too big in Alberta for us to not play a role.
Nice. Amanda, do you have any specific examples of how ATB's programs has pushed innovation forward?
Well, I can speak to probably more close to the program that I have, and really what we've done is really helped business owners get their ideas, formulated into clear models and financial models. I know it doesn't sound exciting, but it really gets some of those bases in there of how you're going to scale and grow, how you're going to invest that money, how you can show the investors the return on their investment. And obviously there's a lot of assumptions that go into anything like that. But really we're just putting that rigor and that business foundations in place to have a lot more confidence in that business to be able to scale, that they have the right team around them, they have the right processes there, they know how to make the ask. So it's really that we're really focusing, again, on the fundamentals, which may not be as exciting to many, but that really helps propel them to be able to scale and grow faster in the marketplace.
Nice, thank you. Lindsay, the Edmonton lead of Startup TNT, can you speak to the importance of networking, community building for entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. Arden alluded to this, but having that network is really important for getting your product to market or to the next step, the next phase of your development, and meeting with the right people to help you be able to do that, whether they're connections locally or connections into other markets, Toronto, Vancouver, the US, elsewhere. So at TNT, we work really hard to build that community with our weekly happy hours and then co-hosting events, being on panels with health cities, co-hosting events with API, doing our life sciences summit where we are connected. We kind of bring in 8 to 10 partners in the life sciences space across Alberta to help us run that summit. And this is a really great opportunity for entrepreneurs to build their network. The other thing about enabling this network is it gives you a chance to practice how you communicate your business, how you communicate that value proposition. And as you're saying, Amanda, there can be a hurdle to go from the specific research terminology to terminology that your investors can understand, that anyone without that very technical background can understand. And that makes a big difference. So a company that's been in the news recently, Nanostics, they could say, oh, well, their company does an exclusionary test using this methodology, and that doesn't mean that much compared to if you say, well, they have a novel prostate cancer test, which means you only need to do a blood test to get a certain level of accuracy versus a biopsy. that poses other risks, that's a much more tangible understanding for investors and people that you're pitching to. So every time you get to practice communicating what your business is, what your company is to others, that will help refine your pitch for when you meet your future investors, your potential buyer, anybody else down the road.
I like how there's already a theme sort of emerging around, it's almost like flattening a social hierarchy so that everyone's speaking the same language, because scientists need to be able to communicate to entrepreneurs and business service providers, et cetera, and vice versa. So I like that theme because in order to collaborate, in order to work with various programs, you need to be able to communicate. Appreciate that. It may be part of your answer of this next question, but I'm curious about, with this health sector rapidly emerging in Alberta, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs in order to stay competitive? And let's not think just competitive on an Alberta scale, but on a global scale. This one's to all of you.
Yeah, okay. A couple things to look out for is how quickly can you get into bigger markets? How quickly can you get those connections? Because that will be really key to your ability to scale and demonstrate value. Another thing to look at that we haven't touched on yet is your IP. So especially if, and any sort of royalty agreements, especially if you're coming out of a university or some other arrangement where there's somebody that has royalty rights, make sure you understand what is in those agreements. There have been improvements, especially recently, to make sure that the companies can stay nimble. But historically, there have been companies that were really hamstrung by what was in those agreements. So make sure to read it and make sure it gives you enough flexibility in the future and the ability to build your company.
Yeah, and I would say similar to some of the other points I heard is that you may not be everything needed to grow that company, and make sure you're surrounding yourselves and using your network to get the right people around you to grow. Trying to do all things, you're probably going to fall in some areas. And one area I see a lot of entrepreneurs fall in is that finance expertise, and probably really slow to hire, whether it's a fractional CFO or someone else that's going to give them that really numbers and business side to support them. I find that hire often happens a little late, and then when they do hire, they're like, "Why? I wish I had them a year sooner in my journey." So that's kind of what I've been seeing.
Maybe a little less specific to life sciences, but in building a company in general, I think it's important for founders to really understand strategy, and I can't overstate that, because everybody thinks they know what strategy is. They think, I'm just going to say that I'm better, I'm faster. Well, if you're a superlative, it's not a strategy, right? You're on a relative scale to somebody else where they can catch up. A real strategy means you're different. It means you're doing something in a way no one else is doing it, and that's really how you have to position yourself in order to, whether you're looking for an exit from a large pharma company, or you're looking for an ability to compete against other people who are in your market. So generally in business, I think that is really important, and something we really need to start thinking about early. I mean, you might not, it'll evolve, it'll change, because as you grow, things change. But never take your eye off of how you're different, because that's how you're going to stand out.
Okay, so in order to be able to execute on all of that great advice, what resources are available in either Calgary or Edmonton or anywhere in Alberta for entrepreneurs?
Resources. Well, I could plug Edmonton Unlimited, seeing as I'm on the board, but that goes without saying. I think it's important to look outside, both within your area of expertise and outside of it. So let's just say you're a technical founder, you're a scientist, then you need to start studying business in some way. And there's a lot of stuff in entrepreneurship out there. You can look it up, but startups in general. How do you build teams? How do you scale? But if you are more on the business side, or you have, and you want to learn more about what's happening in health tech and life sciences, you should study, outside of business. One podcast that I do enjoy is the Peter Attia Drive, where it talks about longevity hacks, longevity science and technology. If you want to stay on top of what's happening out there, right, in the world, you got to stay current, and so that we can figure out how does your solution fit into whatever's happening in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we've already talked about Edmonton Unlimited, obviously Startup TNT. It's just getting out there in the networks, and then once you get out there, more and more ideas open up in more and more areas. Our entrepreneur centers, again, have some of those business financial courses. So I think there's just so many resources all around us. It just takes talking to your network, asking, and getting involved. That we are really fortunate that we have a really great innovation ecosystem being built, and a very supportive one in this community.
Yeah, and I guess adding to all that, there are a lot of grant opportunities in Alberta, in Canada. Tap into those. They're especially looking for novel technologies, life sciences products. So, Alberta Innovates has grants, IRAP has grants, Prairies Can has grants, and even, I guess, Plug and Play that just opened their office right there, they're looking at life sciences companies as well to get you tapped into networks in Silicon Valley. So there is a lot out there, and as investors, we love seeing that entrepreneurs have access to the grants that they're eligible for, because it does often take a lot of funding to get a life sciences company to market or to the stage to be able to exit. And so those grants are a great opportunity to leverage investor money, or investor monies can help leverage grants.
Great. Okay, so this next question, I'm going to add to it. First, I want to hear any advice that you have when it comes to an entrepreneur who's pitching their idea. It could be a formal pitch, it could be a casual elevator pitch. What advice do you have? And then after we answer that question, I'm going to ask, what advice do you have for investors when it comes to getting pitched to? Because I want to put the pressure on the investors as much as I want to put the pressure on the entrepreneurs. Who?
All right.
You want to go first, Arden?
I guess I will. Okay, so advice for entrepreneurs, I think of any entrepreneurs, is you have to learn, especially if you come from a science background, learn to distill it into general language that people understand, and learn to address, how do I put it? Be succinct, right? Less is better. And I would also say one thing that I've been moving towards in terms of when you're doing a presentation, there's a lot of history or thought and advice about you got to start with the big problem you're solving, show the big market, show the big trend that you're hitting on. But I think, alluding to what I said about strategy earlier, and this is something I read from April Dunford, who is a branding and positioning expert, open up with your unique perspective on why you are the one to solve this problem. What do you see about this problem that nobody else does? And that is a way to get an investor's attention, because that shows why you're different and it speaks to your strategy. So again, it's about coming right out and saying, the world does this and we see it this way and nobody else is because they can't do what we do. That kind of a message. That will catch attention right away. But then after that, get right to, like I said, plain language and being able to communicate that out. As for investors go, I would say don't be afraid of health tech and life sciences. There's so many investors I know who stick with B2B enterprise SaaS software. That is like 90% of venture investors out there, because that's an easy one to pick up and learn quickly. But the way I look at it is it's a great business model, but it's a limited market we have here in Canada even, right? Most of your really big SaaS companies come out of the US. If you want to find big opportunities, you have to be willing to look where others aren't looking. And right now, this sector is it. There are so few institutional investors at the early stage who are looking at this. And if you as an angel investor are able to educate yourself and get in on it, there's some great opportunities for returns. It's high risk, but God, the exits that you can get from this industry they dwarf what you can generally get in software. So like I said, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to learn and just get in there and start talking to different founders in this area.
Good advice. I sadly joke that I'm always picking between my favorite children because the deal flow is so strong and strengthened, and I want to invest in so many, and you only have so many resources. Thank you, Arden. Amanda?
Yeah, I'll maybe hit on something new that I hear a lot is often as entrepreneurs and especially as science people, we have lots of ideas and lots of ideas. And then sometimes we go from the idea we're pitching to all these other add-on ideas, and that starts to make maybe an investor nervous. Do you have execution risk? Are you going to stick with this one idea long enough to see it through? So that's what I hear a lot from our lending team, just to really making sure they want to know that the investor is really focused, that there is a market at a macro level for it, but they've also done the work from the bottom up to know how they're going to play in that market and what their role is. So from those two perspectives, I think it's really important to have in your pitch. I would say on the flip side, as I get a lot of critiques on helping people, that I mean maybe the investors could be a little, I would say more open-minded or gracious, that not everybody's going to have a perfect pitch, not everybody's going to have this, think back to maybe somebody's really technical and you could put somebody alongside of them that's going to be able to sell the product better. So see the opportunities that, pitching isn't everybody's skill set, and there could be a really great business under there. They're just not articulating it very well.
I like that advice, Amanda, because we're in startup week, so these are early stage companies, and it's actually joke's on you if you are too critical at that stage, because they're not going to have a perfect pitch deck, and you might miss out on a great opportunity. Yeah. Okay, Lindsay.
Okay, so for startups pitching, create that emotional connection. As much as we want to see the data behind your product and how it's better than the current standard, we also want to feel connected to the problem that you're solving and to you. And so, humans like stories, so create a story with that emotional connection. And then I think on the investor side, something that we prompt our TNT investors to do is, when you're thinking of a company, when you're doing due diligence with a company, when you're reviewing a pitch deck, think of what are the things that you like about it, and then what are some questions that you still have, and what are some concerns. And so it's always important to, even if you feel like, oh, this isn't a company for me, well, what is there of value in that company, and helping to understand that a little bit more, because that can help make sure that you don't miss out on potential opportunities. And then I think the other piece from the investor side and also from the entrepreneur side is to really understand what is the regulatory pathway that this company has to go through. What are those different hurdles? And they'll vary depending on the type of life sciences company as well. But that's an important thing to look into, because that's a key, for us, that's a key differentiator between a life sciences company and another company, is that they have these regulatory hurdles to address.
Okay, great advice. Thank you so much. Now, this is a quick session. I do have one final question for everybody, but I wanted to open it up to the audience in case anyone here have questions for investors and service providers for startups. We got one.
Yeah, thank you so much for talking about what you're looking for from that initial pitch. I was hoping you could just drill into that a little more in terms of the specific market for health technologies or life sciences. That's a harder market to enter than most. There's a lot of information asymmetry, principal agent problems. It's a harder market to crack. So what do you look for from startup companies in their pitch to kind of think about that pathway? Like, how do you evaluate the approval level and the uptake level in jurisdictions as opposed to just the profitability, revenue, stuff like that?
So at the institutional fund level, we actually have a tool that we use that comes from an organization called CIMIT, C-I-M-I-T. It's out of Boston. And it is a it's a nonprofit that was developed by a number of major U.S. institutions to help investors understand and be able to do due diligence on life science companies. So you can look it up. But what they have is an entire road map and a list of the 4 different big areas of risk, and they actually describe each one and each level. So what we use it for is we actually sit down with the founder and we'll go through the whole list with them and be able to and get agreement on where they are, so we can really assess their progress across all of those dimensions. And at that point, we can then get a good sense of, okay, how far down the road are you? What are the risks left? So that's on a tool level. We actually do have a due diligence tool that we use that's been developed by an industry body. But I think something that can differentiate you, and I've seen this in a couple of different, and not every company will get this, but another great one is if you get a strategic investor involved, one that could be a potential acquirer. That's obviously, especially in small molecules or medical devices, that is a big one, right? Because you are actually solving a problem that they want you to solve, and if you do it well, there's very likely going to want to acquire you. The thing is with a lot of life sciences business models, it's the flip of software. So the software business model is you pour a bunch of money in, put $1 million, you get your product up to wherever it needs to be, and the rest is sales, and you're judged on revenue. Whereas deep tech, life sciences, biotech is the flip of that. You basically pour a bunch of money in, and it's about data, and it's about regulatory hurdles. So you got to be able to show your progress through that. After that, you're most likely going to be taken out by a significant player, and they will commercialize you because it's a global market, and they have the channels and everything for that. So it's a different way that we evaluate it. And if you can show that you've got some sort of interest or some sort of idea of who would be in that space that wants to acquire you, that's probably something that we would put a lot more weight on.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more question.
So what, in your opinion, you think is necessary in the venture funding space for us to start getting results comparable to our neighbors in the South, in terms of like the number of unicorns, the big exits?
I didn't catch that whole question.
Yeah, so it's a
go
little
again.
bit fuzzy.
All right, so in looking at startups, right, in the US, you get so many more unicorns, so many more billion-dollar companies. The scale-up is much faster. So I'm just trying to, seeing that you're the venture guy here, what, in your opinion, is necessary in the Canadian space for us to start seeing those results comparable to what's going on in the US?
Well, Jason's probably better suited to answer that question than me. But I think, when we discussed it, you have to look at the maturity and we'll talk in particular here in Alberta, right, of where we're at in the life cycle. And I think where we're at still and what we can be really good at is getting a lot of early stage research to that kind of phase 1 clinical trial level, and then handing that research or those companies off to later stage investors that'll come in. Once we get really good at that, the later stage investors will start showing up. And the ones, because they are looking for those opportunities. So instead of us here trying to expend our resources, trying to take something all the way across the finish line, it's about realizing that we have an area that we can be very good at and create that environment where the larger investors will come, the bigger, and they'll take it to the finish line, and those exits will come, and we'll start generating those kinds of returns. So that's probably, from an Alberta perspective, I hope that kind of answers your question. It's just sticking to our knitting and doing what we're good at.
It's a good question. I think we should be continuously asking ourselves that same question so that we have great examples of, the Valley who's, far above and beyond statistically their ability to fund these growing startups and tech companies.
And hopefully in 5 to 8 years, it'll be a different thing.
Yeah.
Right, we're focusing on. But right now, that's where we're at. And people, like us, like API, like all these different organizations and investors, that's what we're trying to do.
Why not Alberta, right?
Why not?
Okay, so I have a final question. I recommend you to take your phone out or a notepad because you might want to write down the answers. My question is there a book, a blog, a podcast, anything that you love to read or reread just to stay updated or inspired about the health sector, investing, starting companies?
I can go first on this one. There is a book called Invisible Women. And what I really like about that book is it helps you think about the drugs, the technologies, the data that we have currently, and it lets you understand how women were included or excluded from developing that data. And it cuts across all industries, not just life sciences. But an example that I remember from that book is drugs act differently on women than they do on men, including things like Tylenol and Advil. And so it provides a little bit of perspective as you're moving forward with your company. What could you be thinking about to better hit a broader market or hit areas of markets that haven't been appropriately addressed? Because women are 50% of our population, so it's kind of a big deal.
Invisible Women, good one.
Yeah, I love that book. It was such an eye-opener for me. And frustration, because they talk about some drugs that would be very helpful for me if they just went to market for women. I think it's already been talked about. Peter T. I do love his work and listen to his podcast and his book Longevity. So in terms of keeping up on the health space, that's certainly what I listen to. And in terms of fundamental startup business design, probably The Lean Startup would be the book that I go to and recommend the most for just most startup businesses.
I missed that. Building a Startup is the book?
The Lean Startup.
The Lean Startup. Oh, yeah. Great.
Eric Rees. Well, I am going to default back to my original answer. The podcast or the Peter Adia Drive is great for understanding what's happening in general trends and kind of like cutting edge. I think in general, it's hard. I don't know that there's a lot of resources for life sciences startups that I've found so far. But in terms of general startup, there's a group called a VC fund out of the Valley called Hustle Fund, and they specialize in kind of like pre-seed, early stage tech startups. And there's a lot of great information there about things like cap tables, term sheets. They'll talk a lot about how you bring in your first investments and such. So from understanding how to bring in capital side of things, that might be a good resource to understand. Most of their advice and podcasts are really around software companies and such. But again, there's still nuggets there that you can learn about pitching, about raising capital when it gets to that time.
Okay. Now, apologize to the next amazing speaker. I'm going to steal a few more seconds because I want to give a couple recommendations as well. One is called Deep Medicine by Dr. Eric Topol. The reason why I'm inspired by this is because they talk about how technology can change and improve the healthcare systems without taking jobs, without sacrificing existing careers, but actually enhancing them. The other book is called Lucky Dog. And yes, I am a big dog lover, but it's not really about that. It's about this woman who's this surgical oncologist veterinarian. She takes tumors out of animals for a living. Then she gets a thyroid tumor herself. She's also a comedian as her side hustle, so she's a great communicator. And she wrote the book about herself navigating through the public healthcare system as a patient and contrasting that to really the private healthcare system of the veterinarian world. I thought there's no right or wrong. It's more just a matter of insightful, thought-provoking stories that make you think. So those are my two recommendations. So thanks again to our panelists. Great conversation. I hope you all got some tips and new resources for yourself. And let's give them a round of applause.
Thanks for coming.